Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. We have a real special guest, very timely guest, with Keith Reynolds, who's been a long-time entrepreneur in the tech field. And one of the big reasons for him being on the show, not only being an expert in technology and social forecasting, but also we're in a, obviously, pandemic, which has affected many things, and it's affected entrepreneurial endeavors as well. So without further ado, Mr. Reynolds, welcome to Carnivore Radio.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate having the opportunity to be on the show with you guys.
Awesome. Well, you're a really perfect example of someone with a long history of entrepreneurial activities, but you have to admit, I would assume that you've probably never experienced. You were in the midst, and you are in the midst of launching a very exciting endeavor of being somewhat blindsided by something that you never ever would expect. Correct?
No, I don't think any of us saw it. I mean, we had a couple novel coronaviruses that never materialized, and I think people expected that to be the normal. And here we are, where we're in the middle of being greatly affected by it, and it's caused huge disruption for many people, and it's also created opportunities for people. And I think generally, I believe we're all very adaptive as human beings, and as hard as things are, we're also going to come through this and advance.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do agree with that. One thing I think that's an area to touch on is strategic planning. How do you think the pandemic has affected that from a business standpoint? And before you even go into that, maybe you can just talk real quickly about what your business entails.
Yeah, thanks. So I have a company called Publio, and we help companies publish content and build in media into their lead generation, their networking. And we've done that for 7 years by creating what I call a content hub, really rich sources of information for a very targeted audience. And it's part technology and how you structure it. It's part showmanship, how you market something. So but it's all about highly credible educational, informational, or entertainment value, or some combination of those, on top of a technology platform that is built to nurture relationships and understand the needs of people based on how they're interacting with their business, your business. And it's content strategy to help you leverage all the technology that's so available. I mean, the tech stack, technology tools that are available are, in the hundreds. There's a marketing tech chart that has 5,000 companies on it to help offering technology.
Yeah. No question.
So it's how do you make sense
of
it? And that's really what I try and help people do.
I think that's excellent and makes a lot of sense. And, you were making great advances in it, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. So, how do you think, and I'll throw it out to Dr. Lopkin, how do you think this has impacted strategic planning? It used to be the 3, 4, 5 year plan. How do you think that's changed because of this?
It's really shortened our planning horizons. we don't know what we're doing for next month.
Yes, it's much more difficult to put together a long-term plan when you don't know what's going to be open, what's going to be closed, where in the country new spikes are going to come out. It's really shown that while you still need to have a long-term plan, you have to be much more adaptable and you have to act much quicker than you used to. For small businesses, that's pretty much business as usual, but large businesses, they've had to learn how to be much more nimble.
Yes, I think as we're in the middle of this makes all the sense in the world. But gentlemen, do you think this is going to change the nature of strategic planning forever? In other words, you'll have the overall template, but you may have more people that are doing like maybe game theory and how, interjecting kind of aspects to the plan just to kind of mix things up. So it's not, you think plans are going to be a lot less static than they used to be?
Yes, and I think that the companies that have good data architecture and know how to move data around and analyze data and turn it into information and make decisions, and they're the ones that are going to be able to act more quickly. So, it's really just when they talk about moving to the cloud, technology is now allowing you to flow data around very quickly and analyze large amounts of data. And that provides agility to these companies. That's how they've been able to do some of the fast changes that we've seen. I think the economy would be in much worse shape if we didn't have a nimble economy.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Dr. Lopkin, any comments on that?
He's absolutely right. I mean, what we've seen over the course of the pandemic is companies that people think of as offline businesses, restaurants, some small retailers, things like that, really had to push to get online. Prior to the pandemic, Google had actually done a survey. More than 50% of small businesses, even in this day and age, did not have a website. And 70 to 80% of small businesses did not have a way to accept payments online or through mobile devices. This pandemic has really pushed them. So now something that they used to think of as, well, maybe we need, maybe it could help us, maybe not. Now it's become absolutely necessary. We've worked with a lot of our clients. We've worked with a lot of our clients on what we call an adaptive business model. And really what it is a combination of products and services being able to be offered online and offline. This way, when a crisis hits, like a pandemic or like power outages like so much of the Northeast had a few weeks ago, you can quickly pivot to offline or online or product or service, whatever is available for you to keep doing business despite the new crisis.
I was really interested, or it's really amazing, I'll throw out to Keith, that what percentage of businesses did not have websites?
Was more than 50% according to Google.
And I bet some of those websites were just basically static anyway, as you alluded to. So, Keith, I would imagine those businesses that weren't positioned to be interactive are the ones that are really the initial casualties in all of this, correct?
They could be, or they could equally invest in people and skills and start to use it. It's never too late. And it's a necessity now. The thing that keeps me in business, and I've been doing a lot of custom consulting, helping companies come up with their content strategy, because you need to have the cloud infrastructure, and you need to have web communications and use social media tools to help drive people to your content hub. But you also have to train your people. and help them develop new skills and hire new skills into your business. And so that's, I think, a big change that we're going to be seeing. It just becomes this is going to be permanent, and we're not going back, I believe.
Now let's talk a little bit about the human element. Perseverance, keeping upbeat. You were more along, more down the road, so to speak, with this, but I'm sure it was still disruptive. There were many people. There was someone that opened up a restaurant right by my house. I don't know how they're doing right now, but it was, then 2 months later, the pandemic hit. So sometimes things are beyond your control, no matter how upbeat you are. But talk about Keith first, maybe even Dr. Lopkin with your clients. How much of a role does a good mental attitude have in terms of perseverance and seeing things through, and then also seeing the opportunities instead of the dark side?
Yeah, I mean, I've always subscribed to the old Zig Ziglar, your attitude determines your altitude. And, it's your attitude that's going to get you through tough times like this. And you have to have empathy and understand other people are also going through really tough times as you do business with them. And certainly listen, but also be a leader in terms of that attitude of positivity, and we're going to accomplish things together. That you have customers because they need problem solved, and we have to work safely and adopt all kinds of personal protection equipment, technologies, and ways to stay safe, and ways to reschedule, and ways to work from home, ways to get together safely for meetings. I mean, we're still going to have meetings at some level, but it's rebalancing and then realizing amidst all that change is opportunity. And if you have an attitude of seeing things as an opportunity, for me anyways, it makes things bearable instead of getting yourself all down about it.
Dr.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's
your experience.
Yeah, Keith is absolutely right. I mean, we do a lot of mindset training in our coaching programs, and every problem is an opportunity. The difference is your mindset. Do you look at it as this insurmountable obstacle that you can't handle, or do you look at it as an opportunity that you can overcome, maybe find new ways to do business? A couple of months ago, we had on our show Chris Conway, who is executive director of the West Hartford Chamber. And, the Chamber did a lot of in-person networking events. So they had to do a lot of pivoting. Now, all of their networking events are done through Zoom. It's all virtual. They've been able to be a great resource because they were able to adapt what they were doing and take advantage of the opportunities. And businesses have to do that. Nonprofits have to do that. The mindset, a positive mindset is absolutely crucial, because if you don't have it, everything looks horrible, and you can't fight through that. You have to be able to say, okay, you know what? Things aren't the way I want them to be, so let's pivot, let's see what we can do about it, and move forward.
It's really interesting. If I do concur, and absolutely, it's really interesting that we're, talking about how what used to be a physical event and activity, there was a leader who saw the opportunity to create a community online and, use their authority and their trust, to borrow Google words, to bring people together and solve problems. And I've joined several networks. I'm on a couple Slack channels, and I belong to a weekly group that meets every Friday morning at 7 a.m. And it's all digital, and we're getting business done, and finding ways to help people with our skills and our talents. And it's what I thought about while you were talking, Dr. Lopkin, was that people are using the internet in an entirely different way. When we started on this digital journey, it was about websites, right? And then we added social media to that. And now we're connecting. It's like the last mile. We're connecting people to get together and be in a virtual conference room, and then do breakout sessions and get work done together. It may not be ideal. There may be, other ways that you have to get your social activity, in your life, probably through more local kinds of events and with family, smaller circles of people. But still, nothing is stopping us from doing business with people in our town or on the other side of the world.
Absolutely. Now, hold that thought, because we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, Chuck. Elmo wants to know, what is the census?
The census is a special time when we count every single person in the country.
Do kids and babies count, too?
Of course. Counting everyone in your home helps support your neighborhood by funding schools, hospitals, and more. So complete the census by calling, going online, or returning your form by mail. It's totally private.
Visit 2020census.gov and
make your family count.
Brought to you by Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Ad Council.
And we're back. And remember, if you want to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693. Let us know how you've been adapting to the changing world.
Well, talk about, you speak of adapting. Let's kind of look at maybe even more of the bigger picture. The pandemic, the coronavirus will eventually go away, but I think some of the changes that have been, and some of the market forces and demographic and societal forces are not going away. Let's first talk about, I'll throw it out to you, Dr. Lopkin, first, the cities. You look at the recent headlines, New York City is, I think the vacancy rate has never been anything close to this. Your comment on that?
Yeah, cities are going to have to adapt even more than businesses are, because now companies are seeing they don't need to have everybody in the same place. They don't necessarily need all that office space. They can let people work remotely. And they're finding people can be just as productive. They can get as much done. And in a lot of ways, they're more productive because they're not dealing with commuting times. They're not dealing with the headaches of getting into an office. So for a lot of companies, you're going to see a much larger percent of their employees working remotely. On the flip side of that, those companies that do want everybody in a collaborative space physically, you're not going to see them going to the same layouts as you used to have offices. You're going to be seeing much larger spaces. So either way, cities actually lose out because people don't have to live in a city to be by their office anymore. They can live anywhere and work remotely. And for those companies that actually want larger communal areas, you're talking about office parks, you're talking about campuses, and for the most part, you can't just drop one of these in the middle of a city. So you're going to see a lot of companies and a lot of workers moving towards the suburbs and even more rural areas as long as they've got internet access.
Mr. Reynolds, any comment on that? You also mentioned something before about more of kind of a work apartment type of scenario. Maybe you can comment on Dr. Lopkin's thoughts and your own.
Yeah, I've been working out of a co-working space for the last couple months that's really built its comeback on providing a clean, safe space to work, the amenities that you'd have in an office, the more privacy in a more professional environment than you would have at home, less interruptions. And so, they've totally repositioned themselves into how they can serve the community. And yet, it's very safe. There's no tables facing each other. Traffic that you within the Haven facility. That name of the place is Haven. Within the facility is all one direction. You walk in a big circle. So it's all about safety, and yet the reality that there is work that has to get done, and there's virtual services that can be provided. Like you can use it as a mail place. You can use it as for the conference rooms, but still work at home, so you don't have a permanent desk there. And then they have digital programming, a noon lunch and learn. They have a virtual breakfast meeting for members, and then they have a physical get-together that they've started to do, all with social distancing. Everybody wears masks and stands 6 feet apart in a big circle. So, there's just big changes in the way we work, but we're still working, is sort of my observation. And to Eric's point, the facilities are going to adapt as well.
Let me throw something out, kind of somewhat unrelated, but related. Sports is a business. Forward out to Dr. Lopkin first, and you, Mr. Reynolds. I wonder if the nature of sports isn't professional, and even collegiate sports isn't going to change. Will people be less apt to congregate with 110,000 people? Will it become more of what we're seeing now in Major League Baseball? Dr. Lopkin first.
Well, certainly in the near term, you're going to see a lot of changes. A number of collegiate leagues have already said they're not having any sports for the fall season. They're pushing it back to at least January and possibly the spring. So you're already seeing that. Yes, people are going to be a little more concerned about physically getting together. And it's not just sports. Movie theaters are seeing they're going to have to change the way they do business. Concert venues. A lot of these venues actually are allowed to reopen now, but under such limitations that they've decided not to, because they can't get enough people into the venue to actually make a show profitable.
Well, let's talk about one thing that you mentioned, one business, one industry, movie theaters. They already were hurting. Could this be the final chapter for them?
They're gonna have to adapt.
Go ahead.
They're gonna have to adapt quite a bit. During this pandemic, a lot of what were supposed to be movies that were released in theaters actually just went right to streaming services and on demand. So with fewer people coming into theaters, and now the studios actually having an alternative way to release the films, they're going to have to do a lot of adapting and make it more of an experience going to a theater.
Mr. Reynolds, you had some thoughts?
I agree 100%. And my local theater had reduced the number of seats to put in the recliners, and they went from a 70-year-old model of a popcorn and hot dog and candy to a bar with food out in the lobby. And so, whether they can survive or not, I just don't know. I think it looks really bad now, but, in the grand scheme of things, I think it will come back. We will find medical advances to address this coronavirus. I think we'll be more prepared for pandemics in the future. At the same time, we have all these other new ways, as you just pointed out, Eric, to consume media. And now we can do it in our cars and in our homes and while we're on the subway. So it's a very different world.
Did we maybe eliminate the middleman, so to speak, the middle person, by maybe things will be like Dr. Lopkin and you kind of alluded to as well, it just go direct to the customer.
Yeah, the industry's restructuring, and I was trying to make the point that I also don't think it's doom and gloom. I think all these companies are going to adapt. It's Like Encyclopedia Britannica had gotten out of the encyclopedia business because they saw digital disruption coming, and it was such a minor portion of their revenue stream that they were able to let it go and still remain a viable company. And I think that the cities, I was just looking at the data, and rents are down to what they were 10 to 14 years ago, and our vacancy rates, and so it's not like it's fallen off the cliff. It's just gone back to a level of 10 years ago, in New York City in particular. So, it takes a lot to come back from that, but it's also not insurmountable.
And in terms of the entertainment venues, the sports venues, all of that, I think you're going to see something along the lines of what we saw with restaurants, where people need that social connection. They want to do things with other people. So when restaurants reopened, you saw a flood of people going to these outdoor venues. Once they can move people indoors and once you can get people into movie theaters, I think you're going to see folks want to be a community again rather than doing everything out of their house, by themselves.
I think that's a very
Yes.
good point, Dr. Lopkin. I would agree with that, yes. So overall, maybe let's say going forward, where do you see, tough question, I'll throw it out to either of you. Where do you think the biggest change in the way we do business? What do you think is the biggest outcome in the way we do business is from this pandemic?
We're doing business through the glass, and I think we've got to be thinking about how do you do business through that pane of glass, and create experiences for your customers and create processes for your company to help serve people through the glass.
Dr.
Yeah,
Lopkin?
I completely agree with that, and I think the biggest thing that we're going to see that's not going to go away is the adoption of new technologies, mobile apps, Zoom video chats. You're going to see things that people predicted were going to be big 5-10 years ago, finally got this big push for people to adopt. So you're going to see a lot more of that and a lot more integration of online tools and offline experiences.
Nice. Do we really need the opportunity? I think we're coming up against it, aren't we, Dr. Lopkin? We need an opportunity for Keith to basically shout out his business and how people can get a hold of him and his services and his company.
Well, why, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. This has been a great conversation and really stretching the imagination to think outside the box. My company is Publio, and you can find it at P as in Peter, UBLI.io, Publio. And I don't know if we can put a link on the page for this, but love to have you come by if you are trying to figure out what you need to do online and create that experience for your customers. That's what we help companies do. Love to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Reynolds and Dr. Lopkin. I thought this was a great show, very forward-thinking.
Absolutely. Keith was a fantastic guest. Hopefully we'll have him back on. And for our listeners, you've been listening to Carnivore Radio. We're here every Friday at 4 o'clock at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio. You can also hear the replay as well as the Carnivore Bites podcast at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. So we look forward to hearing from you and see you again next week.
Thank you so much, Keith.
Hey, thank you, guys. Look forward to doing this again soon.